Hello and welcome. Today we are continuing with series 2100, which we started 3 vlogs before. We started with nature of work 2100, then we covered 2110 and 2120, which is governance, risk management, and now we are covering 2130, which is control. So as per our customary practice, let's start some interesting question relevant to this standard 2130, which is control, and try to get responses to all those questions in the process of this video. In responding to risk, what evaluation the internal audit activity must make? How the chief audit executive would consider the risk appetite, risk tolerance, and risk culture of the organization? What is the importance of developing risk and control map? And how the internal audit activity promote continuous improvement in control effectiveness? If you are new to my videos, this is Tausif Mushtaq, an audit strategist, control specialist, and board advisor with over 2 decades of experience in governance, assurance, risk and controls, fraud examinations, and forensic reviews. The objective of my videos in the audit and assurance series is to promote the internal audit profession in its basic spirit, whereby the internal auditors having a clear understanding of the standards and the international professional practices framework overall, so they can contribute to achieve the mission of internal audit. The mission of internal audit is defined by the Institute of Internal Auditors, which is to enhance and protect organizational value by providing risk-based and objective assurance, advice, and insight. So let's start standard 2130 control and see what is the basic requirement of this standard. The internal audit activity must assess the organization in maintaining effective controls by evaluating their effectiveness and efficiency and by promoting continuous improvement. The assurance standard A1 of 2130 requires that the internal audit activity must evaluate the adequacy and effectiveness of controls in responding to risk within the organization's governance, operations, and information systems regarding the achievement of the organization's strategic objectives, reliability and integrity of financial and operational information, effectiveness and efficiency of operations and programs, safeguarding of assets, and compliance with laws, regulations, policies, procedures, and contracts. The consulting standard 2130C1 also have some information for us to understand how we will apply this standard in the consulting engagements. Internal auditors must incorporate knowledge of controls gained from consulting engagements into evaluation of the organization's control processes. So let's understand more explanation about this standard through the implementation guide. To fulfill this standard, the chief audit executive, the internal auditors, start by attaining a clear understanding of the concept of control, the characteristics of typical control processes, the formal definition of control. Through conversations with senior management and the board, the chief audit executive would consider the risk appetite, risk tolerance, and risk culture of the organization. It is important for internal auditors to understand the critical risk that could inhibit the organization's ability to achieve such objectives and the controls that have been implemented to mitigate risk to an acceptable level. So, reviewing the results of previously completed evaluations, so internal auditors may find it useful to review the results of previously completed evaluation of key controls, related action plans, and potential effects of any recent business related changes that may introduce new risks or may expose the organization to new risks. Internal auditors may want to consult the organization's legal department, chief compliance officer, or other relevant parties like risk management department regarding laws and regulations with which the organizations must comply. It is beneficial for the internal audit activity to understand how the organization remains aware of changes in regulatory requirements and ensures compliance with them. Let's see how the understanding of control framework helps the internal auditor. It is important for internal auditors to obtain a thorough understanding of the control frameworks adopted either formally or informally by the organization, and to become familiar with globally recognized comprehensive control frameworks such as COSO framework. Although the components, processes, and assignments of responsibility of controls are similar among different frameworks, the terminology used by different frameworks may vary. Let's get further understanding of this standard and go through the implementation guide further. Internal auditors should also understand the responsibilities related to maintaining effective controls. Senior management typically oversees the establishment, administration, and assessment of the control system. Management generally responsible for the assessment of controls within their respective areas. The internal audit activity provides varying degrees of assurance about the effectiveness of control processes in place. The division of responsibility may be included in a management control policy for the organization. And finally, the internal audit activity should have in place an established process for planning, auditing, and reporting control issues. So let's understand what are the considerations for implementation on the standard 2130 control. Through the implementation of the standard, the chief audit executive and the entire internal audit activity ultimately should demonstrate an understanding of the organization's control processes, alert management to new control issues, and provide recommendations and action plans for corrective actions and monitoring. The internal audit activity should obtain sufficient information to evaluate the effectiveness of the organization's control processes. Controls are designed to mitigate risk at the entity, activity, and transaction levels. A competent evaluation of the effectiveness of controls entails assessing the controls in the context of risk to objectives at each of those levels. A risk and control matrix may help the internal auditor facilitate such assessment, because this is a very important document, risk and control matrix. So let's understand this in more detail. Such a matrix can assist the internal audit activity in identifying objectives and the risk to achieving them, determining the significance of risk, taking into consideration the impact and likelihood, ascertaining the appropriate response to a significant risk, for example, acceptance of it, pursuance, transferring the risk, mitigate or avoid risk, or maybe sharing the risk like having the insurance of a certain area, ascertaining the key controls management uses to manage risk, evaluating the design adequacy of controls to help determine whether it may be appropriate to test controls for effectiveness. So maybe design has some issues, and if you can design it better, the control will be more effective. And last but not the least is the testing controls that have been deemed adequately designed to determine whether they are operating as intended. And this is a general practice that if you have established some controls and if you perform those testings, even though you are convinced with the design and adequacy of it, the test that the way control has to be implemented is not implemented, or sometimes after a certain period of time automatically changes. So that may have an impact on the overall control effectiveness and implementation. So risk and control matrix is also very helpful to the auditor. In employing a risk and control matrix, the internal audit activity may find it helpful to interview management, review organizational plans and policies and processes, use walkthroughs, surveys, internal control questionnaires, and flowcharts to obtain information about control design and advocacy. For example, if there are flowcharts for SOP or transaction flow, you can collect those SOPs and review them and understand if there are adequate controls established within that. Utilize inspections, confirmations, continuous auditing, and data analysis to test control effectiveness. The cost and benefit of controls are also very important. To evaluate the efficiency of controls, the internal audit activity typically determines whether management measures and monitors the cost and benefits of controls. This would include identifying whether the resources used in the control processes exceed the benefits and whether control processes create significant business concerns. For example, there can be errors, delays, or duplication of efforts. So what is risk and control map? It may also be useful for internal auditors to assess whether the level of a control is appropriate for the risk it addresses. One tool that many internal auditors use to visually document the relationship is a risk and control map, which plots the risk significance against control effectiveness. Continuous improvement is another important area that all internal audit departments should establish. To promote continuous improvement in maintaining effective controls, the internal audit activity typically provides the board and senior management with an overall assessment or compiles the results of control evaluations accumulated from individual audit assessments. So it's like your risk review and assurance section or your post-audit section is giving feedback actually to the continuous monitoring section. The chief audit executive may recommend the implementation of a control framework if one is not already in place. Additionally, internal auditors may make recommendations that enhance the control environment. For example, a tone at the top that promotes a culture of ethical behavior and a low tolerance for non-compliance. These are good examples actually. There are some additional steps that the internal audit activity may take to promote continuous improvement in control effectiveness. These includes providing training on controls and ongoing self-monitoring processes. This is regarding facilitating controls or risk and control assessment sessions for management, helping management establish a logical structure for documenting, analyzing, and assessing the organization's design and operations of controls. There can be focused trainings like you can pick any SOP, an important SOP, and have an interactive section with the respective department, how they are implementing that relevant SOP. Number 4 is assisting in the development of a process for identifying, evaluating, and remediating control deficiencies. Helping management keep abreast of emerging issues, laws, and regulations related to control requirement, and monitoring technological advancement that may assist with control efficiency and effectiveness. This is again a very important role that auditor can play proactively and have a good relationship building with the auditee, as well as have built controls and strengthened control on proactive basis rather than conducting an audit, but having interactive sections, focus trainings, and strengthen the control then and there after having discussions with the management. So last but not the least, how to demonstrate conformance from this standard. Documents that may demonstrate conformance with the standard 2130 include the internal audit activities, assessment, and testing of controls. So these actually may include the auditor's working papers and minutes of the meetings with relevant stakeholders whereby controls were discussed, risk and control matrices and maps, narratives of walkthroughs, results of surveys and interviews with management, results of control testing. Conformance may also be demonstrated through plans, reports, or individual engagements, follow-ups on the issues raised in the audit reports, and an overall evaluation of controls. If management maintains a proper set of operating and control procedures to communicate expected controls to staff, this may also demonstrate conformance. Continuous improvement may be evidenced in the constant updating of standard operating and control procedures to reflect the changing environment. So thank you so much for watching my videos and staying till the end. Please share my videos, subscribe the channel, like my videos, and also spread this so that other people can get benefit from this. Thank you so much.